Bear with me, brothers. We need more brothers. 6-brother team in operation, double the enemies, double the terminus, allow double classing, double everything. Okay. I do like the way they're going about this. I mean, not just making the team larger, but also making the enemy size larger. Yeah, this is definitely something that's been highly requested ever since the game came out, and obviously we've been going through a bit of a rough spot with performance. So I'm not 100% sure if something like larger teams is possible. However, this is still an idea that I think floating around is pretty cool, considering like this could be something that's possible for Space Marine 3. But yeah, for the game right now, I would like to see, the game actually run a little bit better before we start thinking of adding more players. Still though, very enticing idea. I do want to see something like this in the future. It would be cool, maybe, if we had some sort of extra mode for maybe Siege or maybe Operations or something to just add in double classing. That would be kind of interesting. Or, obviously, just making a larger team. However, we also talked about double classing before, and team perks kind of messed that up a little bit, considering like something like advanced conditioning. If you have two instances of, if you have like two team perks and both of them are advanced conditioning, you're never going to lose out on contested health. It practically just stays there. So, I mean, they would definitely have to work that out, right? Like, being invulnerable, I mean, in a way, you're kind of like soft core invulnerable to to damage if you can just refill your health whenever you get, a headshot or melee attack. If you're able to just refill your health whenever you can do that, I'm not 100% sure if that is something that is very appealing. As far as double classes, obviously they would have to adjust team perks. Opens up the idea of support classes, buff classes, healing classes. Opens up making duo or trio based mechanics with proper communication, making an opportunity for proper boss fights and not bullet sponges with dodges from time to time. Okay, I'm not 100% sure how. I mean, as far as the boss fight structure, I'm not 100% sure how relevant that is to how big the team is. I'm happy with the boss fights we have, though. Opens up more variation in who brings what gun and what build. More brothers equals more emperor per square inch equals less heretics equals if you're against this, it means you're a heretic. Okay, well, I'm not against it. Obviously, I'm not against it. It does sound pretty fun to have larger teams. I definitely think a larger team for Space Marine 2 is pretty appealing. I agree, but I just don't know if the devs have it in them to pull something like this off. However, I did want to kind of float this idea out there again. In the case that this is still something that people are interested in, I think this is something that could be highly requested for Space Marine 3 at the very least. It would be pretty cool. It would obviously be pretty cool if we had an update that added maybe an extra team member for squads, or for siege mode or something. But I'm not 100% sure if the devs are going to be able to go down that road, considering the performance hitches we have at the moment. 3-man co-op just doesn't feel right. I love the game to death, but every co-op game is pretty much 4 people. I know not every game has to follow the trends, but it's to the point where I have 4-man teams to play HD2, Battlefield, Battlefront, Darktide. Really sucks having to swap someone out or do the old, you guys can play, I was going to watch a movie anyway. Yeah, that's a fair point. I definitely think if you're already used to the structure and you already have people to play with, trying to jump into a game with 3 people, I get it. You're gonna have to drop somebody, but you could always just like split it up, right? Like 2 players on one team, 2 players on the other team. I'm not too sure how that would hinder your enjoyment of the game at the moment, but I mean that's a fair concern. I mean, in the case of Darktide, it is kind of a good comparison because obviously Darktide and Space Marine 2 has a lot of crowd control going on. So I do think it's pretty funny. Like, if you consider the fact in Darktide, if you have 3 people, perhaps, maybe, you get surrounded a lot easier. But I think Space Marine 2, part of the appeal for the combat there is dealing with threatening but very unique enemies, kind of like Lictors, Raveners, Biovores, Terminators, Sorcerers, that sort of thing. In Darktide, I think if you were to see a Ravener, I feel like the Ravener's moveset would make it a little bit of a frustrating enemy to deal with. For a first-person game that doesn't have any parrying. Yeah, I think that's a little bit weird as far as like the gameplay is concerned. I think with Darktide, For whatever reason, I think you'll just be in a position where you get surrounded a lot easier with 3 people. And in Space Marine 2, I think getting surrounded kind of plays within the advantage of the combat, because essentially you're just going to be able to, if you know what you're doing, and appropriate level and everything, you're going to be able to have a fun time fighting more enemies in Space Marine 2. So I think if you add in, like, somebody, you would have to obviously add in a lot more enemies. Just adding in an extra person in Space Marine 2, I think, would make the game a little bit too easy, probably. As for Darktide, I think Darktide definitely plays into the fact that there's 4 people there, but, like, the enemies, I feel like, just kind of spawn at you. Like, in Darktide, honestly, comparing the Darktide enemies to Space Marine 2 enemies, especially, like, the crowds, I think is pretty interesting and comparable, but I feel like Darktide is a lot more relentless with the enemy spam. I feel like, at least in Space Marine 2, it feels selective. Like, here's a large pool of Tyranids, whereas Darktide, it's just like, oh, here's a funnel of enemies, and they just keep coming in. So I'm not 100% sure, though. You might need to correct me on that, at least the way I see Darktide. I see Darktide as, it's a very fun game, but I feel like if you had 3 players instead of 4, you're getting surrounded a lot easier. Like, you're definitely going to be having a harder time with 3 players in Darktide. 2 players in Darktide, even. But, like, I guess in Space Marine 2, depending on how good you are, you might actually have more fun solo. Whereas in Darktide, I don't know if it can actually appeal to you to go solo. But, yeah, again, I'm not super experienced with Darktide. I did just recently get to level 23 Psyker. I've been using the Void Staff. Very fun. I do enjoy Darktide quite a bit. But, like, yeah, for the actual combat, I would rather fight a Ravener than the Ogryn bosses in Darktide, basically. So now I have to play with 5 underclass people with no team perks. I'll pass. Okay. Fair point. I guess there's definitely more room for error if there's more players. I think if we're talking about larger teams, I think it would be cooler if it was like one big boss fight. If that was one way the devs were able to pull this off, where it's like it wouldn't be like an operation or a siege mode where you're going to different areas or anything like that. It would just be one boss fight, one big boss fight, and just a handful of people. You know what I mean? That would be pretty fun. I think that would be cool, and an easy way to implement a bigger team mode. But still, as far as enemies are concerned for that, and if the devs are even interested in doing something like that, who knows? But I think that would be the easiest way to do it, just like a raid boss, essentially, but have like 6 players. I think that'd be fine. Again, though, team perks would have to be balanced, but as this person points out, not a lot of people really care about team perks. Hopefully that's getting better in hard siege mode. I am starting to notice some people running better perks in games in general, compared to patch 8 launch. Man, patch 8 launch was so weird, guys. Like, seriously, like, what happened? There were so many new people just joining the game without team perks. Yeah, I can kind of agree with this. It's just, if you're queuing up with more people, that means there are more potentials for error within the team synergy, I guess. I mean, as far as if you had actually half the team without team perks, that would be a bit frustrating. I could see that. I've read here before that someone from the devs said they know it's possible to do more than 3-player squads. Modders were able to do it. I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. Dude, seeing those matches where it's like, oh, this is 12 Space Marines within like one operation or whatever, that looks so much fun, but it does look very chaotic. I can understand where the devs are a little hesitant for something like that. They don't know how to keep the server stable with it. Yep, makes sense. Or something like that. I don't know if it's true. But it would be really fun to play with more brothers. Maybe some sort of boss fight considering of 2 to 3 squads. Dude, yeah, that's exactly that's exactly what I was thinking. That would be kind of cool, though, actually. Like, it wouldn't be just spawning in 6 players. It'd be spawning in 3 teams of 3 players. I think that would be kind of a good way to look at it, right? But yeah, as far as what type of boss fight that would be, especially in that circumstance, not 100% sure. But man, that would be fun. Man, dude, honestly, the more we start to talk about this, just a larger boss battle. Not even an operation, not even a siege mode. Just one big fight. Especially, dude, we were talking about the Hive Tyrant and having actual Tyranid guards. You know, the actual, like, Hive Tyrant guards with the armor and stuff. That would be pretty sick. That would be pretty sick if we were able to introduce a new enemy within a new boss fight, but it would be obviously the same boss fight we fought, but it would just be an upgraded version. And we could also see something like that with the Trigon Prime. maybe you could actually have tunnels that we can't, close up. And yeah, that's why we need extra squads, because you need squads to handle the mobs and also squads to aggro the boss. And I guess depending on, rotation for the tunnels, maybe that kind of switch up the Trigon Prime's aggro and stuff. I don't know. But honestly, this does sound pretty cool. And we haven't really done any theorizing for like a new mode or anything like that for a while. So last time we talked about like any sort of game theory or something that they could add in, we were plainly talking about new classes and exactly what they could do. I do remember at one point talking about the obviously the upcoming Tech Marine, but the Tech Marine was also a requested class from launch. People were talking about the Tech Marine as soon as the game came out, and I think since a lot of people wanted it, the devs were able to pull it off. So perhaps, maybe this isn't as hopeless as I thought, but still, most likely this is still something that could be introduced in Space Marine 3, that I think should be introduced in Space Marine 3. But yeah, I do think this is also the easiest implementation of this, is obviously just like one giant boss fight. It's not even, you don't even need to go throughout like a giant level or anything. It's just simply put a heightened boss fight for a, bigger team. So essentially you can just make that boss fight as hard as you need it, I would be super down for that. Very Straybon logic and reasoning. I like it. If not Straybon, and due to the madness that will follow from doubling everything to lead to exponential problems and chaotic madness. Oh, whatever. I still like it. Alright. This is kind of a funny photo here. OP, original poster, what have you done? I have done the will of chaos. Alright. Jeez. Yeah, for the most part, I do think something like a 12-person operation, more on the side of chaos. It still looks very fun. It does look appealing to be in a larger team, especially in siege mode. Considering the fact that you can get bots, I think that's very fun. If everyone has their own bot, and I think it looks very, very cool, especially with the guardsmen. Just like having 6 Space Marines, also with guardsmen taking on endless waves of Tyranids, chaos. It looks really cool. Still though, I think something with a big team would fit. I think it would fit a little bit better with a big boss fight, and not something that could potentially just crash our systems every time we start it. You know what I mean? However, as far as like performance goes with the 12-person mod, I thought it looked pretty good, but I'm not 100% sure if that's like an official mod or anything. So, but yeah, regardless, I think this is something that's doable. I do think it's pretty cool that we actually kind of met in the middle here with like a mode that could 100% work with a big team. I think would be, yeah, something considering like a giant boss fight that obviously is just like its own mode, and it would be like Hive Tyrant, I don't know, super hard or something. I don't know. It would be another sort of difficulty layer, but it would be its own mode. I think that'd be cool. Obviously, I would want a new boss fight as well, but it'll be probably a little bit easier for devs to just kind of rehash a new, stronger Hive Tyrant than to just make an entire new enemy on a, I don't know. We're all just theorizing here, so why not? Let's just new bosses for this fight. It should be though. Honestly, if it was for Space Marine 3, if they were to add in like a single larger team boss fight for Space Marine 3, it would 100% be a new enemy. But yeah, I'm just trying to cope a little bit here, I guess, and try to consider the fact that, hey, man, this might be possible if they just bring in the Hive Tyrant, add in a new enemy, a smaller new enemy. Maybe that's an easier enemy to add, or they were going to add anyway. Use that as a way to introduce it. New mode, bigger teams. Yeah, I think that sounds very cool. But yeah, obviously, this is not something that the devs ever confirmed, or this is not something to expect. But we weren't expecting a class at one point either, so I don't know. I'd still like to hold on to hope that the devs are getting creative, and something like this is definitely a fun conversation to have regardless. But for Space Marine 3, I think a larger team battle is more appropriate for something like a new edition of the game, rather than, unfortunately, trying to force a large team into the servers, or large team mode into the servers that we currently have. Not 100% sure how good that would come out. But yeah, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this. I think this is a very fun conversation to have because obviously having a large team is something that appeals to a lot of people because giant battles feels very 40k, and I agree with that. So yeah, at one point, maybe in Space Marine 5, we can have a team of 100 players. That would be amazing. Unlikely, but yeah, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about this. Thanks for watching.